Hello, my name is Doug Smith, and welcome to another edition of Portsmouth This Week, the voice of the Portsmouth Town Hall. We have a special topic this week. Today is the 25th of May, 2012, and this last Tuesday, the Elmhurst Planning Committee was examining potential uses for the town-owned Klimm properties, specifically the old Elmhurst School, and on Tuesday they presented its conclusions and recommendations to the Town Council. We have two guests today. EPC member Steve Kirkpatrick. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Doug.
And Kathy Melvin, a Portsmouth resident, also one of my close neighbors. Welcome, Kathy.
Good morning.
Steve, to start off with, what is the Elmhurst Planning Committee and who's on it?
The Elmhurst Planning Committee is a group of citizens that represent organizations from around town that are stakeholders in the Elmhurst property, Elmhurst, broadly defined Elmhurst and the contiguous properties. And we were tasked by the Town Council with generating options for the town regarding what to do with the Elmhurst School. Our mission had certain stipulations, one of which was that any use had to be consistent with the operations of the Glen Manor House. And we have the group was probably 15, 16 people, and really worked, I think, quite well together to come up with a number of options. We were tasked with up to 5 options and ended up coming up with really 2 options for the council.
Okay, now, so you were basically a town committee and people volunteered for this committee and you were appointed by the Town Council?
Correct.
For the specific task, to look at the Elmhurst property.
Yep.
Can you discuss, I was kind of impressed going through some of the background documents on this. Can you discuss the process that your committee used to go through the various options? You guys looked at a lot. I was quite impressed.
We did. We had, the way we began the process was that we originally agreed upon the constraints that we were operating under, such as the mission of our group, and also, the considerations that we would ultimately run any potential idea through. So what we did is we started off with basically a whiteboard where everybody came forward with ideas that they thought might work for the property, and we generated a list of several dozen potential options with regard to what to do with Elmhurst. And the ground rules were that no idea was a bad idea. Everybody's ideas were heard, and no one was shut down. And then we ran those ideas up against the constraints and considerations that we felt were important in evaluating them. Some of the considerations, were related to economic development and town financial conditions, and others were more binding, such as CRMC and DEM, which I represented the Portsmouth Youth Sailing Group, and CRMC, deeming this Class 1 waters, ruled out a number of waterfront options, which was disappointing to me, but nonetheless, those were the constraints that we had to operate under. And so the way we did it is we took all the options and we ran them up against the considerations and constraints in a matrix, and then we came up with rank ordered scores for each of the various options that we had generated.
Now, if somebody wanted to take a look and see the breadth of what you all went through to look at, where could they access that PowerPoint presentation you gave on Tuesday night, or is that on your website?
We can make that available through Mr. Klimm, the town administrator. We're happy to
that'd be
put
great
that
if
up
we
on
could
the
maybe
town.
post that on the town website.
Sure.
That'd be super.
Happy to do that.
Because as I say, I was quite impressed at how many of these things, and as you say, it must have been a great brainstorming session because some of them were pretty far out.
We used several sheets of stickies that we posted them on the board.
Now, the key thing that you were discussing Tuesday, what were your recommendations to the council? And one of the things that apparently kind of came in towards the end of your examination of all this was the Aquidneck Land Trust proposal to do a conservation easement of the Glen property and come up with some actual money to help tear down the old Elmhurst School. and perhaps make it into more of a park-like area. Could you explain that proposal and fairly kind of briefly, if you could?
Sure. As we were continuing down multiple paths, some members of our group approached the Land Trust about an open space option. And after they had some preliminary meetings, the Land Trust came back and said they would be willing to provide $1 million for the removal of the school and a $150,000 matching grant for improvement of properties within the Glen in return for placing a conservation easement on what is what we defined as the Glen properties, which you can see on the map, that this map. And basically, our group felt that was a great option in light of the fact that many of the other options did not appear to be economically viable. And this option really solved a problem and provided critical funding to help the town achieve what we felt was the best option in front of us.
Well, I noticed that the second option was basically some kind of multi-purpose building down there, which would have required the demolition of the Elmhurst School to start with. And the estimates, I don't know, I guess they're still looking for a hard estimates on that. But perhaps $1 million to demolish it. And then it would require money to build, design, et cetera, some kind of modern building. And then use it for whatever uses the town could think of. But the bottom line is we're talking about several millions of dollars in probable bonds or something put up with it. That's probably the only way the town could afford to finance these things. We have a graphic that we can show right now of that area that it's up on the screen right now. I know you can't point to it, but I think our viewers can see the yellow areas outlined are the conservation areas. The little areas in red are called out zones, which I think is kind of interesting. Could you explain what those are?
Sure.
What they might mean for the town?
So out zones are areas that are mutually agreed upon between the Land Trust and the town that provide for potential future development. And the way that those out zones get structured is subject to the negotiation between the town and the Land Trust. And what they're intended to do is to give the town flexibility with regard to future improvements and facilities that may help enhance the town's revenue generating potential within the Glen.
Okay, so in other words, it's not really, even though it's a conservation easement, it doesn't preclude all revenue generating potential for the town, specifically in those zones. And as I understand...
Well, Doug, can I
Yes,
correct you
please.
for 1 second? So even though it's a conservation easement on the entire property, the town, in fact, retains the ability to generate revenue on the entire property.
Right.
And we view this as a great option because of the fact that, one, it provides money to get rid of Elmhurst School that the town doesn't have to come out of pocket for. But two, it allows the town the flexibility to engage in all manner of revenue generating activities provided that they're consistent with the terms of the conservation easement.
Now, I thought it was interesting because you also included in your presentation a mention that whenever it was that the town acquired the Glen property, 89 was it? Something
Yes.
like that? Included in the wording that allowed the town to buy this property, basically it kind of says that it's going to be used for recreational and other purposes anyway. So a conservation easement doesn't seem to me to be too much farther than going much farther than that. So the conclusions of your committee then, after looking, how long have you been looking at this?
A little over a year.
Okay, so your conclusions were, the first one would be to go with, at least to work with the ALT to come up with some way to make this a reasonable option. That was the first one. And the second one was to try to look at some other option, which probably would cost considerable money for the town unless they could figure some other way to pay for it.
Right, and the thing that we struggle with in both the second option and a number of the other options that were considered is that it's very difficult to envision lease payments or rent payments that could support the amount of money that the town would have to borrow. Even in this low interest rate environment, it's hard to get a return on the investment that the town would have to come out of pocket for in order to justify the capital expenditures that the taxpayers would be asked to come up with.
Sure. Now, Kathy, I know you expressed some concerns about the conservation proposal at Tuesday's meeting.
Yes.
What are your main concerns?
My main concerns are the easements themselves. In the limited research that I've been able to do, I've discovered that there is benefits to having conservation easements, but it's the content of the language within the contract that remains sort of the sleeping giant. What we would be doing, we're taking on a partnership in property the town currently owns outright. And I recall 40 years ago when the issue of purchasing the Glen was up for great debate. We went down to the gymnasium one Saturday and we voted, and fortunately the people of the town opted to purchase the Glen. And over the years it's proven to be a very, very good decision. Children have used the Glen. My kids grew up down there. And I want to see the Glen there for the same purposes for which it was purchased and paid for by the people, with the structure that's in place within the charter that provides the voters and the people of Portsmouth the right and the ability to go to the polls and to vote on the release of any land down there over 2 acres. Now, everything that leads me to believe that the the effort and the time and the diligence that goes into forming a contract like this, which is described as a very complicated legal instrument, is worthwhile. It's in the town's best interest to do their homework ahead of time and apply the due diligence necessary to ensure that the public completely understands what it entails to have a partner in the ownership of the Glen, so that for future generations we know where we stand.
Okay, so the main issue then has to do with the language of the agreement specifically, and as I understand it, that's kind of what's going forward right now with this thing. Do you have any thoughts about other possible options for the use, or what would you recommend other than this?
Yeah, quite frankly, I understand what the committee went through in trying to digest all of the various approaches that people, I'm sure, came forward with. However, I'm perfectly happy with the idea of a park down there, if that's what the committee wants and if that's what the town council votes to approve. I don't have any objection whatsoever to that. I do remain concerned about the out zones, the negotiations that would go on, what they mean, and would the provisions within the charter still apply to those out zones? Okay,
so and I think even the EPC in your presentation said that a lot of these things have to be worked out, and I think that's, my understanding at least. I wasn't at the meeting on Tuesday. I apologize for that, but I understand that the town administrator, John Klimm, was told to draft some kind of a contract with ALT for the town council's consideration. And so those kinds of issues would be addressed, your issues about the specific language and what's required and what's allowed.
One of the things that we really thought was necessary was to go out for an RFP and an appraisal on what it would actually cost to level Elmhurst School, ensure that all of the hazardous material that may be in the school is removed in the fashion dictated by law, as I understand, and also the monies needed to put the land and the grading of the land back into the proper condition in order to go forward. And of course, there is the safety issue. However, one member of the council expressed an interest, since there seemed to be at the time a sense of urgency to get this thing through so it could be voted on in November. One member of the council indicated that he would be in favor of floating a bond in order to take care of the immediate problem so that the council would have a little breathing room and be able to spend the time necessary to observe and understand and engage in the discussions on an issue of 150 acres of what is actually very, very valuable prime property that currently belongs to the town.
Well, I don't think anybody would argue about the beauty of the place and the value of it to Portsmouth in general. I do think, though, just like almost any other kind of offer, I guess I don't understand why this wouldn't be the kind of thing that could go on the ballot in November. See, I guess I don't see the need to wait a year because, number one, it's going to cost some money just to maintain the property for liability reasons alone. If we could, and John Klimm and our town solicitor, I guess, are doing this now. If we work out the details to the satisfaction of the council, I think the due date, the last date that I saw was 8 August, which is the last day that something can be put on the November ballot. I guess I don't understand why the council would not want to take action on this. This is, I don't see any reason for inaction, to be honest, because it doesn't seem to be that hard of a...
I absolutely not. I totally agree. I don't think there's any reason for inaction. In fact, we should be highly motivated to become very, very involved and very active in it. But I think it's important to understand the land trust is, and by the way, this has no implications regarding ALT. I mean, this applies to all land trusts. They are staffed by highly trained land trust attorneys. We're dealing here with a situation where we're asking a town council to make a major, major decision without the benefit or the background of the expertise of a land and the guidance of a land trust attorney. I don't see any reason at all why this can't be done. However, we are within a very tight timeline in order to get an amendment to the General Assembly to vote on in order to appear on the November ballot.
Yes, I know.
And I don't think we should be squeezed into taking any shortcuts to arrive. If the council is perfectly satisfied with the terms in the contract and they have done their due diligence, then I think people like me, should sit back and just, watch this thing unfold. But in the meantime, I think it warrants scrutiny and it warrants the public being very, very concerned about the direction that this takes.
Well, I understand, and I can understand your concerns, but I also think that here's a committee of Portsmouth residents who have been working this problem for over a year. Have come up, and this is not just one or two people. This is probably people that represent a good cross section of Portsmouth. Are you on the committee, Kathy, by any chance?
On the Elmhurst committee? Oh no.
Okay.
I'm a member of the PCC, but it's never been a topic of discussion yet with the executive committee of the PCC. As I said, I'm inclined to form opinions, and I did let them know that I was going to do this, and they approved of my participating in it. But I really, this is something that I care about, and I know other people in town that care about.
Sure.
Looking before you leap, because we've learned on the state level that not doing so can be very, very painful. The consequences can be painful.
Yeah.
And even with our turbine, we've had the problem there. that is going to be very costly to the town in the future. So
It's never cost the town anything so far.
no, but it could. It has the potential of being a costly situation. That, in other words, let's do it the right way and follow a procedure that's suitable.
Well, I agree with your thought. I guess what I'm thinking, though, is, number one, the EPC is a group of citizens that was
Oh, of
duly
course.
authorized by the
And-
town council to do this, whereas the PCC is not.
Oh, no,
And
no.
The PCC is, do we even know who is the membership of the PCC? You know.
Oh, of course, there's a list.
There is a list?
Oh, of course there is a list. And as I said, this is not a PCC undertaking whatsoever.
But it could be.
But well, I'm hoping that they'll support my concern, because I think it's legitimate.
Well, I think your concerns are legitimate too,
Yeah.
but I also note that there are several other town committees which have sent letters of support into this.
You're exactly right. And I think that's probably why I went to the meeting, because there seems to be a tendency sometimes when you run into a stumbling block and there is somebody there ready to rescue you, you reach for the life ring, and I think ALT came forward with a solution that had somehow, not been able to be resolved at the committee level. And I think they worked diligently and they worked hard, but it's a very big undertaking. And my own personal opinion is that perhaps a professional in the business of determining what would be suitable down there in terms of being compatible with the Glen Manor House, and what would also perhaps have been a revenue-inducing business. Maybe somebody with the expertise could have been brought in.
Well, maybe somebody will be running.
I
I'm
hope-
not sure
yeah,
how,
I
I'm
think
not
that
sure how
would have
John
been
Klimm's gonna
good.
do this.
For what it's worth, we had several real estate professionals on our committee. We have a number of people who have extensive business experience on the committee, and we really looked at. We did not end up without a way to solve the problem.
Right.
We looked at the borrowing costs, the town's incremental borrowing costs, the town's borrowing capacity, and we're fully cognizant of the fact that the town could fund this. However, I also sit on the Pension Review Commission, and I see the other constraints
Of
that the
course.
town budget has on its plate at the current time, and we're mindful of the fact that the Aquidneck Land Trust has been in existence since 1990, has been
Right.
a valuable partner to Aquidneck Island, conserving 2,368 acres and 66 properties, and we view them as a good faith partner that we can come to mutually agreeable terms with in order to help resolve this problem in a way that really does benefit taxpayers, and I think ultimately will be endorsed by the PCC as it seems to be the most fiscally responsible.
Let me give you my
path.
own take as just a citizen of Portsmouth, I guess.
Sure.
It sounds to me like, number one, all towns are having tough financial problems right now. We all know
Exactly.
that. Taxes are going to continue to rise. Costs of everything just about continue to rise. I think the idea of somebody coming in with $1 million to basically and only require essentially that we agree to protect land that we've already agreed to protect anyway, and the concerns, the details of the thing are still yet to be brought forward and made public. The town has a perfect right. The town council will have a right to vote on it. I'd like to see the public be given the right to vote in a referendum about it, about what do they want to do.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is I don't see this as being a kind of Wild West show where somebody's trying to force
No.
something down anybody's throat. I think people are doing due diligence, and that started on Tuesday when it was presented to the public, when the town administrator was directed to do certain things by the town council. So I guess I'm much more sanguine about this thing than I think Kathy is. I agree with her idea about, the idea that we're from big government and we're here to help doesn't quite work.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think this looks like a win-win thing to me. I mean, it's it's money that we don't have to do something we know is needed, and I just really don't see the downside, assuming, and this is the big assumption, that people can come up with the right kind of language that does what we want, particularly within those out zones. I think those are probably the important ones.
Exactly.
I guess the impressive thing to me about the EPC was that I don't know whether you solicited support from the Conservation Commission and many other committees in town, all of whom are town committees. They're duly kind of authorized town organizations to provide support for this, but it seems to me it generated quite a groundswell of support. So you have a group of citizens who basically went through a lot of options, came up with these, and finally came to the one that they think makes the most sense. They've gotten a lot of public support from a lot of other civic organizations, town official committees, to move forward. It seems to me that the smart thing would be to move forward with this thing and let's see where it goes. With the idea, Kathy, that we're going to be looking at all these things that you're concerned about, would that help ease your mind a little bit on this thing going forward?
Absolutely. My position here is not to be contrary or to be an obstructionist of any sort at all, but I look at what's going on with Studio 38 up in Providence, and maybe as a Rhode Islander, we're getting kind of used to getting battered around a little bit because legislators or council people in the past have not taken the necessary steps to ensure that the public's rights and the public's interest have been provided for, and that is solely my objective and my interest.
Sure. Well, I think we're all in consonance,
we're completely
really.
in agreement. Yep.
And what are the next steps, Steve, that have to go, be taken to get this process moving further? Where do you think we are in the process from your perspective?
Right. Well, the town council did the right thing on Tuesday night, and they charged Mr. Klimm with formulating an RFP to really get our arms around what it is exactly going to cost to remove the school and return it to a proper grade so that it can be turned into a park, and that way we can have hard numbers to work off of. And that we feel like we have a fairly good estimate, but in fairness to everyone involved, we need to have a much tighter handle on the numbers. And then the second part is determining or really beginning the initial framework for the conservation easement. And as Kathy rightly points out, to get everything on the table so that there are no surprises in that negotiation.
I understand that.
And so I think that those two elements are the next logical steps, and then putting it on, getting it, if the council decides that it is worthy of going on the ballot for the voters, we have to get that, as you said, in the process by August 8th.
We're running out of time here, but I'd like to thank you and your committee for all your work, and I'd like to thank you, Kathy, for coming on today and for going to the meetings. We need more people to go to these meetings and these workshops. My final question, I think I know the answer to it, is how people in Portsmouth can get more information about this project and express their opinions about it. And I think the answer is they email John Klimm, the town administrator.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you both very much for being with me today, and thank you, and we'll see you the next time.